So you phrased it as a conversation. So I thought I would just share a few thoughts and then welcome any either just comments or questions or whatever. And I haven't prepared anything because I sat in the train on my way here and thinking, well, I feel I need to get here and be with you and trust that in that moment something will come that's coherent, sensible and relevant. So time will tell. But I'm just back from Kenya. My wife is Kenyan, and her family live in central district of Kenya. The water supply for the village is a hole in the ground about 1 meter across, and it's like muddy soup. It's extremely poor village, and a slight shift of 1 month in the way the weather operates, and suddenly the village economy starts a whirlpool going downwards, because they have to plant at a certain time in order to harvest at a certain time, and the whole thing links together, which provides sufficient food for the year, because they grow 7/8, if you like, of the food that they're going to eat. And if the seasons go strange, then the whole thing, and ultimately then children go hungry, all kinds of domestic issues break out. Ultimately, more people arrive in Kibera, the biggest slum district in Africa, which is just inside Nairobi. I've been in Kibera. I was taking a group of Barclays Bank people in there because their chief executive said he wanted their people to smell poverty and then ask themselves whether they felt they had a responsibility for the world's poor. You step over bodies and you've no idea if they're alive or dead. In the morning, the pickup trucks go in and take the bodies out. The place is like an ocean of misery and catastrophe, really. It's just an extraordinary place. So I've got one part of my mind is that we're still in Kenya, and at this rather late stage in my life, I have a 5-year-old little boy, and he's meeting his grandma. She speaks Kikuyu, and he only speaks English, but they're big mates and lovely coming together. But the sense of the fragility in that country with everything that's happening right now with climate, and these people with no idea really of what is around the corner heading their way. I founded a company that still operates in Poland, and I rang them up yesterday. And Dorota, my friend over there, is in tears because Krakow is just filling up with refugees pouring in. Thousands and thousands of people, more all the time. And as you will well know, the shelling of the various cities and everything is getting more and more intense, and a lot of lives will be lost. And what really struck me as I was speaking to Dorota, these people that are coming out of Ukraine into Poland, Moldova, other countries, they're us. They're just ordinary people who have the same aspirations around their lives and their children and their, good times, friendships, loves, everything. And they're utterly bewildered because suddenly this very much harsher world has intruded itself into theirs and everything is changing. Yesterday or the day before, something like that, the IPCC report came out saying what is happening, and the scientists from there are basically saying At this stage now, we have to say this. There remains a very small window of opportunity before the worst effects of the climate crisis will wrap themselves around our world and we will not be able to do anything about it. To my mind, that message has been drowned out by the Ukrainian situation. So I haven't heard anybody speak about it. It's hardly on the news at all. It's just there. We live at an extraordinary time. And most of you will live many more decades than I'm likely to. It's like a crunch time, I think, has arrived on our shores. And we can be sad about that, or we can be devastated by that. We can have all kinds of different responses to it. But I think it's really important that we do consider what our response is going to be. And what I think it boils down to really is a choice that each of us have to make as to whether or not it matters sufficiently to us, whether we care enough to try to make this one small life matter in some significant way. And that's an invitation that I think I've received, and I believe it is an invitation that's on your lap right now. And I'm not saying that you haven't necessarily already received the invitation and signed up to it, but it's very clear to me that that is what's happening. It's whether we feel it or not, and I expect many of us don't, but we are the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the most privileged people on this earth. Even though, no doubt, you, like me, some of you will be struggling to pay bills or have all kinds of hassles on your hands to do with just normal living. As ancient peoples all around the world, we would gather. And in those gatherings, maybe many people would come, many families, many different tribes coming together. And there would have been a ceremony ground. And if we take people that taught me, would say at one of the Sundance gatherings, there would have been the tree would have been cut. That's going to be the center pole of the dance. And it's very important that when the tree is cut, it does not touch the ground. So as the tree is cut, all the people are lining up there with the tree to catch it. I mean, it's this girth. They catch it and then they carry it to the ceremony ground. It's planted. And all the streamers and the ropes are from the tree. And the dancers, men and women, begin to gather and the sun dance begins. Outside of the sun dance are all kinds of other people who are well-wishers to the dancers and are praying really for the dancers, supporting their prayers. Outside of that are the people cooking food. Outside of that are people trading stuff. Outside of that are kids playing, if you see what I mean. It's an entire community, some of whom are more or less interested in the dance that's happening at the centre. Many of whom are just interested in the other human being who they find particularly attractive and are doing their best to try and win the attention of and hoping that something good might come of that. You know, for the children, their world is this world and they're just playing. They're just being children. For the older people, maybe, there is all kinds of things, but certainly in the back of their mind will be whether this is the last Sundance they are there present at, and all kinds of other stuff. To my mind, Boomtown is like a modern day, not yet fully formed, similar event. We still, in our DNA, crave these gatherings, when we'll all come together, pouring in from all different directions, when the music will begin to sort of, the drums will begin, the whole feeling of the stamping of feet on the ground and eyes, lifted to the skies, and a whole feeling of this extraordinary, wonderful feeling I imagine we felt in these islands when, as men and women, as warriors, we went into battle. It is a thrilling thing, isn't it? When you begin to feel that movement in you. I would say that our modern day festivals are a kind of still plugged in on some way to that same ancient need that people have to gather and come together and have this shared extraordinary experience. If we just continued, I'm old enough to remember the first Glastonbury Festival, the Isle of Wight Festival, the Woburn Abbey Festival I spoke to these other guys about earlier when I saw Jimi Hendrix play, and various other things. There was at that time, when I was in my early 20s, a feeling that there was going to be a huge sort of spiritual regeneration of our whole society. And as we all know, it didn't happen. And all kinds of other things happened, even though nonetheless seeds were sown that are even now, perhaps one of which is this. But if Boomtown were to be what it's always been, then I would say it will be left behind in the sort of history of things, because it'll just be what it's been, which was great and an extraordinary, by the way, achievement. But it won't meet what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Kenya, what's happening, as it were, in our inner cities, what's happening around the periphery of our society with so many people with so little, and so little hope, and this epidemic of mental health issues and all of the stuff that we've become familiar with. It won't meet that. It won't meet the IPCC report. It won't meet the absolute necessity that we find a different way of living on this earth. If my little 5-year-old, or any of you who have children or are yet to have children, or simply just love the fact of children, or of everything that's beautiful that will rise above the ground this spring, the daffodils that are here, the snowdrops that have already been, the bird song that will begin to become, all the leaves on the trees. If your festival could begin that extraordinary sort of shift of a few degrees and begin to be some of the front runners beating the drum of a new story, bringing people with you, and never for a moment bringing to them the rather depressing thought that we're not going to party, because of course we are going to party, and we love to party, and it is in us to party. But the party should ultimately, and I'm not saying this year, next year, whenever, but ultimately should be a song to life. It should be a song to beauty. It should be a song to the privilege of a human life on this earth. It should be a song to all our children and everyone who will come after us, and a song to our ancestors who somehow made it possible for us to be here. It should be a song to the all that is beautiful on this earth. My little boy said to me recently, he calls me Dada, which I rather like. He calls me Dada. He says, Dada, how is it on the moon? I said, dusty. He said, but it must be amazing up there. I said, yeah, it is. It must be amazing. What do you think's up there? I said, well, a lot of dust. He said, well, Craters and stuff. But where the conversation led was pretty amazing to be on the moon, pretty amazing to be almost anywhere else. But is there anywhere else that we know where you could dive into a river or wade out into the sea? Is there anywhere else we know where you could take a potato, plant it in soil, and a few weeks later dig it up and find 16 potatoes? If that isn't magic and a miracle, I don't know what is. Is there anywhere on this earth, or anywhere in the universe, if you like, where we could experience this extraordinary thing called life? There's nowhere else. This is it. Maybe one day, I don't know, maybe one day, but a long way away. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is that my wish, my hope, if I can put it this way, my prayer, is that you will be very brave in these coming weeks and months at the event itself, and then year on year following this. That you will not shy away, even though you might not like the term, but you will not shy away from the invitation to become leaders. And when I talk about leadership and leaders, I don't mean the way we normally think of it. I mean any person who cares enough about everything that is fine and beautiful in this world to do something about it. Anyone willing to put their hand up when nobody else is, because they know that that's the right thing to do. Any human being of what we might call profound integrity, who is willing to bring that in action in their world. But I'm not just talking about big things, you see, because I think it's most important in the smallest and most intimate parts of our lives, and then grows out. How we are with our partners, how we are with our friends, how we are with our neighbours, how we are with the people that deliver our services, how we are in every small interaction. And I've told this story many times, but once inside a Sainsbury's store with Kai, my little boy, we were approaching the checkout, and I suddenly thought, I'll ask him. I said, who should we go to on the checkout? Which person should we go to check out our shopping? He's 3 years old at that time. He looks along the line of the people there, and I can see he's really focusing. And he says, "There's her." And so in my mind, I'm thinking, is it completely random? Anyway, we go to this woman, and I'm just listening, watching. As we check our stuff out, and I still don't know whether it was entirely random or anything, but I begin to experience what this woman who's on the Sainsbury's checkout is giving us, and what she's giving us is like the essence of kindness, the full essence of the warmth of her humanity. She's interested in this little boy. She engages with him. She has him laughing. She checks the materials out. Everything about her is kind. Everything about her is sort of inclusive. There is no judgment from her. There is nothing except the warmth and the humanity of her engagement with us. I suddenly realized we're going through something. Feels like we're being blessed. There is like a sense of the sheer loveliness of this very ordinary person who is just giving us that which is so free to give. Ever after, for as long as she was employed at Sainsbury's in Exeter, and she isn't now, we would always go to her. And I had this thought, which I'm not really attached to, but this whole idea of a second coming, if there was to be a second coming, Jesus Christ could do better than just sign up at the Sainsbury's supermarket, because you get an endless queue of people you can just... I'm going to give to the Kith and Kin group I work with, LAC's a part of, a task. I'm going to dare somebody in that group to go to Sainsbury's and try and get a checkout job and see what they could do. Sat there as they check out hundreds of them, just for a few months. I mean, maybe they like it so much they stay, I don't know, but you know, it's in the small and the ordinary and in the insignificant that we will discover who we are, actually. So for me, it's not moments like this or moments on the stage. I don't find out who I am really there. I've done it enough times to speak, to have some measure of fluency and some measure of being able to pull it off. But the question will be, when I leave this building and go back to Temple Meads, who will I be then? Who am I when no one's watching is a good question to ask yourself. And if you're unhappy with that answer, choose to go on the journey to change that. But you have to be brave. And to be brave, you have to care enough. And to care enough, you have to have opened yourself up to be willing to allow life in. And it's a big thing. But why is it so important? Because you see, that's basically the arena that you are creating for all those thousands of people, young people mostly, who will come to your festival. And while I understand that you can create the conditions, you can give the steers, but in the end people make their own choices. Nonetheless, I would say that if you sustain your effort, apply your professional expertise, use every ounce of what you've got to try and just skillfully move this, there is the real possibility that you could bring countless thousands of young people onto a track that could mean that their contribution to the kind of world we all wish to live in could come closer. That's how I'd love you to feel. It's that cliched story about the guy building the wall, building the cathedral. You know, what are you doing? I'm laying one brick on top of another. What are you doing? I'm building a wall. What are you doing? I'm building a cathedral. It doesn't matter what your job is, you're building a contemporary new Sundance. You're creating a cauldron of change within which some magic could happen. I've only been to your festival once, and I have to say I found it pretty shocking. I felt like I'd arrived at some kind of military operation and I was definitely intimidated. By the time I managed to find my way through security and all the rest of it, and I was with some incredible woman who was driving this Jeep-like thing, and I felt like I really did know my place as I sat in there. But I was looking at it thinking, wow, like it's huge. And it's like a breathing, living entity. It's just pulsing. But it's yours. And in the very early days of Glastonbury, I was at Glastonbury a few years ago, but in the very early days of Glastonbury, everybody knew that this was a ceremony heralding in a new world. I think it changed, and there may still be profound elements of that, but that's what it was in the very beginning. It hasn't been lost. We have to find our way to sort of returning these things to what they really once were. And we will still dance, we will still sing, we'll still have all kinds of madness, and all those other things will happen. But I really do pray and hope that you hold this dream, that you have one significant lever on catalyzing something truly beautiful through the thousands of people that will come to you. And you don't decline the invitation to leadership. And if you want to use a different word, please do. But ultimately, that's why I'd say it is. We all have influence. How will we use it? I can finish this one piece. I love this story, so any excuse I get. I was invited just about 3 years ago to go to Dorset to a guy who has a sculpture park, because he had a Native American artist visiting. And because this guy knew that I'd been mentored by similar people, he asked me if I'd like to come and meet this artist. It felt very tenuous, to be quite honest. I mean, you know, I didn't really feel like there was any... I mean, why would I go over to meet some guy just because he's Native American and not even the same tribe as the people that taught me? But I did. And when I met him, there was an immediate feeling of recognition. I immediately just warmed to this guy. And he started telling me this story. He said that he was one of 2 Native Americans who were present when the first wolves were released into the Yellowstone National Park after a 75-year absence, because all the wolves had been eliminated. For years there's been this thing about trying to bring the wolves back to Yellowstone National Park in the States. And eventually it was, they got it through. Yellowstone National Park invited these 2 Native Americans to come and to sing the Welcome Home story to their brothers and sisters, the wolves. And it's a great honor. Within the Native American community, this is as profound a ceremony as any other could be. And he said they were there with their drums, and this song had not been sung for a long time. And the pickup truck arrives with the first 2 wolves to be returned. They're going to be released into a holding pen while they acclimatise and then released out into the mountains. So they get to the point in the pickup truck, the back of the pickup truck's being opened, and the guys start beating. And they're beating on the drum. And as they do this, and then they lift their voices, and you know how, I'm sure you know how sound when indigenous people sing like this, like this. I love it. It's like just tears you out into wildness. It's just it's a full body experience, and the whole thing is just raw out there. Their voices singing, welcoming home, and they're beginning to weep. It's a big thing. There is no word in their language for animal, because there are no other, they're only family. So they're singing. The first wolf comes down the ramp and runs as fast as it can to the furthest edge of the holding cave to put the most distance it can between itself and the human beings. And they're singing and they're doing this. The second wolf comes down, very slowly walks down the ramp, and as close as you and I are, it stops and it watches the singers, and they're singing, and it tilts its head back and it joins the singing. And it howls and howls and howls. And by this time, everybody is a mess of tears. And he said he just couldn't believe it. They finish, the wolf glides into the darkness, the rangers leave, the last to leave are the two Native American guys. They look at each other. And he said, as we looked at each other, amidst the joy of having had the honor of doing this ceremony, as we looked at each other, we felt this huge sadness between us because we knew that nobody would sing the welcome home song to us, for we were once part of this. But it's the same here. We were once part of this, with the foxes and the badgers and the birds and the trees. We belonged. We have to sing our way back to belonging again, because we've gone a little bit crazy. We are actually insane, and we have to find our way back home. That's what this whole journey is about, finding our way home, finding ourselves again, finding our Mother Earth again, finding each other again, finding community again, elders finding young people, elders, children being able to trust the adults. And in my view, we either make that choice or we continue to walk towards the cliff edge. So I'm really happy to be here with you. I'll be somewhat less intimidated when I come to your festival next time. And I really admire and respect actually what you've created, because it's a phenomenon. And I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to meet you. And if there were anything anyone wanted to ask or comment on, you're very open to that. I'm not expecting it, but I'm very open to it.
Maybe just quickly, just to touch on the Twin Trail, possibly, Mark. That's a teaching that I think would be good to share.
So people that taught me, Indigenous people, they said we we invite our people to walk the Twin Trail. For any people who have influence, which in the end is everybody if they choose to, for anyone of influence, it is absolutely essential that they walk the Twin Trail. Because the cost of not walking the Twin Trail and walking only one of them is very considerable. We would not trust, they said, any leader or person of influence if they were not walking the Twin Trail. The Twin Trail is the inner path of your own self-healing, self-integration, self-becoming, self-realization, all that big journey of your own coming into balance. And the other trail is the outer trail of having effect in the world. Now, many spiritual and religious traditions over time have focused on the inner trail, but often it's not had very much expression outwardly, unless it is, of course, to try and recruit more people into that particular organization. There are countless numbers of people who only walk the outer trail. And why is each dangerous? Well, the first one is dangerous because all that investment never yields a harvest, if you like, that goes beyond the individual, is the feeling from my teacher's point of view. And they said, for us to be spiritually active, politically active, socially active, and every other way active is a whole human being. Not just one little bit of all of this, but the whole thing. When you take only the outer trail, then ultimately there is nothing to guide the action of that person. You haven't invested in the values piece. You haven't invested in what truly is integrity for you. You haven't invested in trying to exercise and develop your mind to be discerning in any of these ways. So, what is the greatest danger that seems to accrue to human beings who gather power? And it is, of course, hubris. It is the gradual belief, which perhaps we're seeing played out right now in Ukraine, is the gradual belief that anything that I do must be good because I've done it. No, I'm doing it. It's the belief that's accompanied religions as they have cut and hacked and hewn their way. It's the belief that's caused the decimation of indigenous peoples around the world, the whole story of colonization, everything, all of that kind. It's the belief that tears our world apart, and why the term leadership is so often associated with an absence of values of true integrity and all the rest of it. To walk the twin trail means a profound commitment to life. To try to do whatever work you need to do on this person, which in the end is the only person that you have real leadership of, and enable that person to heal whatever wounds and things that you have gathered, to find the wisdom that is inherent in you, to come to peace with whatever injustices have been come your way, and as a human being of truly peaceful human being, loving human being, step forward into the world and share your gifts. And that's often far bigger than any of us imagine. And I just want to add to that, in my late 20s, I'm in a squat in southeast London. I have a gun held to my head. I'm dealing drugs at that time. I really enjoy it. It's a exciting life. I live by my wits. I think I understand the territory. I know what I'm capable of. And I'm in this room. There's a lampshade has fallen over. There's a guy crouched in the corner rocking backwards and forwards. There's somebody else sobbing somewhere. There's someone praying, I think, aloud. And there's this maniac with this gun held to my head screaming at me because he thought that I'd stolen a great big wad of money. And I remember sitting in this situation with two thoughts. One was, wow, like, I'm really there. I've finally found the epicenter of where I want to be. This is really gripping. I'm not watching a movie, I'm in the movie. It's like, wow. And the other part of me was, this is pathetic. This is a grubby little story in some grubby little place that nobody gives a shit about. And I may very well, I will either get hurt or go to prison, inevitably, if I don't change. And in that room at that time, I thought, if I get out of this room unhurt, I am going to change some stuff. So I did get out unhurt. I then thought, what do I need for my healing? And I thought, I need nature, because I've always loved nature. So I went and trained as a gardener. And Lord Angles's estate in Anglesey. And for 2 years, I just worked as a gardener. I think of it now, I just drenched myself in plants with the loveliness of the Menai Straits, walking in the mountains, doing all those things. Then I got a job as head gardener in the leadership centre. And there was a fight between, once again, two Sainsbury's executives. I seem to have some strange relationship with that. A fight broke out between two Sainsbury's executives up a river gorge in Snowdonia. And I, as the gardener, had asked if I could go and accompany this leadership exercise to see what it was that our business did. And the boss of the thing had said, yes, Mac, you can, as long as you promise not to speak, because you're the gardener. And these are very important executives, and they're with a trained coach. So be quiet, watch and learn, and then get back to your gardening. So I'm watching these two guys slugging each other, thinking, wow, I had no idea. This is what happens on executive leadership training. You just sort of wind them up and aggravate them a bit and then let it fester, and in the end you get this big fight, and then out of that somehow we're going to get some learning. And I look across to the trainer, and as I look at him I realise he hasn't got a clue what to do. But for me it looks a bit like how it was at the squat in London, so I decide I have to break my promise. I invite you to break any unhelpful promises that you've made that say you have to comply with things that you find disgusting or disagree with, or that profoundly transgress your values. So I stepped up and I said, I stopped the fight and said, come and sit down. We sat down on the grass by the river, and I said, it seems to me we have a choice to make. We could have a conversation here and ask ourselves, how on earth did this situation emerge? What did we not see early enough to be able to have a helpful conversation that would have enabled a far more grown-up adult way of dealing with this situation? And we could indeed learn something. Or we could just get into the minibus, go back to the training centre, you'll be sent home, and I don't think it's going to serve any of your careers too well, and I'll go back to the garden. So they elected for the former. And after a couple of hours, they're hugging each other and all the rest of it, and everybody's happy, and we go back, and overnight I become a management consultant. 3 years later, I'm the head of consultancy, and then I start my own company in Russia, Poland, and the UK. And one day a client asked me to work with them because they believe they're going to make a fortune, but when they make a fortune, they want at that point to be able to put their hand on their heart and say, we did it with integrity, with our values intact. It's unusual. And I said, yes. 5 years later, they sold it to Warren Buffett. They made a fortune. And then the guy turns around to me and says, Mac, do you have a dream? I said, yes, it's a valley. And in that valley come people who are searching questions of meaning and purpose and community. And how might I make this life count? Because I had that vision in my early 20s. And a friend of mine painted it for me. So I had it for years until one day we got stoned and somebody put a candle on it and it burnt. He said, okay, so how can I help you? I said, well, give me the valley. And he wrote a cheque that bought 50 acres of Devon and gave it to me. And that's what Embercombe is. And then those the Native Americans say, Matt, we want you to write and speak. I said, you could not have picked two things more frightening to me. We said, we're fine, that's okay. He said, no, you don't quite understand. They frighten me, they terrify me. If I try to speak, I will have a panic attack I've had panic attacks in similar. If I try to speak, they say, that's okay, have a panic attack. No, you don't understand. I mean, I could be stood on that stage, people there, tears just pouring down my face for 40 minutes before my term's finished. They said, that's okay. Who would ever forget that? It'd be amazing. And I realized the hopelessness of it. Because I realized they would have kicked me out if I'd said no. So I had to walk towards what I found most frightening and find a way to speak about what is inside me that I really do deeply care about. Because that's what I was born to do, to speak and to write and to work on behalf of this beautiful planet of ours, humanity and all other. And some people listen and some don't. But that should never deter me from doing it. So I'll do it until the day I drop. You are different. You are yourself. Ask yourself, what do you really deeply care about? Ask yourself. And then go on a journey, if you don't know what the answer is, to find your gifts. Unique things that have been given to you, both in experiences you've had and everything. And then ask yourself, what are your responsibilities? And how are you going to bring those three things together? Love, gifts, and responsibilities. And live that life. That would mean that when it's done and you're finished, you'll be able to stand upright, feeling really good about the human that you've become. And that is a really good pension plan. That's a fabulous way of giving yourself a happy older years. So I should finish there.
Has anyone else got anything that they'd like to ask Mac at this point?
Just what happens in your retreat or your valley, is a little bit more about that experience, about what you do.
Yeah, well, all kinds of courses and programs, events. Really, ultimately, well, actually, the truthful answer is, I don't know. Something mysterious happens. When you bring people together and they cook their food, you get hungry, you eat, you're with other people, conversations flow. It's a lot in nature, you're staying out in the yurts on the land. There's like a memory stirs, I think. And people begin to share at a level that they don't usually share. A lot of tears, a lot of laughter, but there is this extraordinary feeling of that I could have my cake and eat it, because what's the point of having some cake if you don't, so to speak? And what that means really is it's like the grasping of the end of a piece of rope and saying, this is my way home. I know it's going to take me over mountains, through marshes, underwater. It's going to put me through everything. My promise is I'll never let go. That's the promise we work towards. Because most of us, if we're going to go on these journeys, we're going to have to go through stuff, and quite a lot of it is quite painful. It's also a lot that's very joyful, but. So I think that's what happens, and if I take the program that I founded there, it's our flagship program, main program called The Journey. When people ask me what's in the journey, which we don't disclose really in any significant way, but it's not We don't do anything to people. I hope that I'm never anything other than respectful, courteous, and well-wishing. But I think we form a secure, safe circle within which people can do what they need to do. And that's unusual. We don't tell anyone what they have to believe. There's no something to sign, you know. You don't join anything unless it's life. And somehow or other, which is an indicator of how crazy our world is, that feels sufficiently special for people to pay something to come and do. You know what I mean? Isn't that mad? I often think I've made a career of speaking the blindingly obvious. It's nuts. But anyway, there you go.
Okay, well, we could finish it there then. So, just to finish from my side, so really, this year is very much about survival, really, in coming back after 3 years. But I see this as a long-term thing, really, a long-term journey of growth. We have to be quite quick as we get there, obviously. But I think, you know, so me and Chris and Graham and a couple of others, Anna and Nick aren't here anymore. We went down to Undercoombe a couple of years ago, and it is amazing. It's such a beautiful place. There's no reception, really, is there, for phones? So you are completely living in nature. You can really, you know, we can have fires, and I think that we should do that as a group, as a company. After the festival, as a bit of a regroup, you know, I'd like to do it as an annual thing, really, where we can all come together and we can share stuff and reevaluate what's happened in the year, and see where it goes. So.
Wish you all good fortune. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.